Okay, so today we're going to be making a keychain on Onshape. I've drawn a quick sketch of what I'd like this to look like. The maximum size I want to go is 50 by 50, and this right here, this sort of oval shape, is my keychain. I want it to say Derby. I want it to have a little dragon on it, and this is the hole for the keyring. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go up to Create Document. I'm going to call this Dragon Keychain. The first thing I want to do is I want to turn off the front and right side work planes. I also want to go up to the 3 lines, go down to Workspace Units, and change from inches to millimeters. I'm gonna then go to the top view on the view cube, and I'm going to look straight at this view. And what I would like to do is I would like to draw a sketch on this work plane. And so you should be able to see, here's my sketch sitting on top of this work plane, like a piece of paper on a table. And what we're going to do now is we're going to draw a rectangle from the origin in this direction. I'm going to click and I'm going to make this one 25 by 25. So then I'm going to take a circle and I'm going to start the circle at the center point of this. Now, do you see the little square that pops up when you get near the center? That is an object snap that tells you that that is the center of the line. And when I click there, it clicks to the center of the line. I'm going to then click on the top of the line. And now my circle is the same size as this line. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to draw a circle just like that. Okay, so I have some extra lines that I don't need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Trim. Trim is this little set of scissors. And when I click on Trim, I can cut off parts of my drawing that I don't need. Okay, so that is the outline of my cube. It looks like I have one dimension that's missing. So I want to give it a dimension for how far those are apart, and enter, and there we have it. So the next thing I want to do is I want to hit the check mark, and then I want to see this in 3D. So I'm going to click the corner of the view cube. And so now I can see this in 3D. I'm ready to extrude it. Now, the maximum you're going to want to make any of these keychains would be 5 or maybe 6 millimeters. But this first part, I'm only going to make 3 millimeters. So I'm going to click on this area and I'm going to change this to 3 millimeters. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit the check mark. Okay, so now I'm ready to draw my design. So I'm going to click on this face. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to New Sketch. I'm going to switch to the top view and I want to put a picture on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up next to Dimension. There's this little arrow. You click on the arrow and you go down to Insert Image. Now you can see that there's an import button here. However, some of your screens are smaller and it may look something more like this, where the import button is beneath the tabs down there. But if you hit Control minus, it will zoom out the screen so that you can actually see this import button. So I'm going to click Import. The picture I want is right here. It's called Derby Dragon PNG. I double click on it and here is my image. So I'm going to click on that. It says Draw Image Rectangle. So what it wants me to do is draw a rectangle that represents that image. And I want this image to be a little bit smaller than the circle that I've drawn. So that looks pretty good. So now what I want to do is I want to draw the shape of this dragon onto the sketch. Now I'm going to show you a couple of tools. Okay. The first tool I've shown you before. This 3-point arc, I can draw a point like right here at the tip of this. I can draw the point there, and then I can draw that like that. Now, you can see that this does not match exactly on the shape of the wing. And if I want to get a closer design to that wing, what I can do is I can use the spline tool. So right here we have spline. And what I can do with the spline tool is I can create a series of points, and these points will make a smooth transition between them. Now, when I'm done, I double click and that locks it in. Okay. Something neat about this is if I hit escape, I can actually zoom in and I can adjust the placement of these dots. Okay. So, and that you can do afterwards. If I want to continue this, I can click on spline. We go and we click, and as we go, we create this, and then the more dots you use, the higher quality it'll be. Double click to finish. And then if you don't like any of these specific dots, maybe this one right here is too far out, I can hit escape and I can move that point to where I want it, but I could also potentially delete certain point. You can delete the points in between by clicking sketch entity, delete sketch entity, and then that point goes away. You can also insert a spline point. I can add points along the spline that I can go back and then I can move them. We need to finish this dragon shape. This section right here is a nice curve, so I'm going to use an arc. Start at the beginning to the end and make that arc. Then I can go back to spline and do this area of the dragon's chest. Any point where you have a sharp edge, it's a good time to stop the spline and start another spline. This is future editing Mr. Liggett. Are you ready for my big mistake? My big mistake I do right here at this moment. That's where I made a mistake. I have a little tail on my spline that will cause me trouble in the future. And you can see that I have the outline of the dragon drawn. The one last thing I want to do is I want to do the eyeball and the nose. So for the eyeball, I'm going to use a spline. Kind of like that. And then for the nose, I'm just going to draw a circle. I also notice that this point right here is a little bit out of, that looks a little better. Okay, so there I have my dragon shape, and I'm going to, I like these rings, but I want those rings a little bit different. I don't want them at the same height as the dragon. The other thing I want to make special sure is that there's no spots where there's no connection. all of the splines connect from end to end, and this area makes a perfect island or a valid profile. Once I recognize that, I hit the check mark and I can go to extrude. And if I did it right, I can click inside of this and it will extrude that shape. So if I click on the edge of this and we click add, let's try that again. We want this shape right there. Okay, so it doesn't look like it is extruding. Okay, so when I look at this, I think that this right here, this little tail, is my problem. And so what I want to do is I want to delete this spline right there. I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to redraw that spline. Starting from this point here, coming down, and double clicking on that point. Let's try that. All right, so that was my problem. That little point was all that was stopping this from extruding. So I'm going to try, let's see what 1 millimeter looks like. That looks pretty good. I want it actually to be 1.5 millimeters for this. Just make that a little bit taller and I'm going to hit the check mark. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now what I want to do is I want to make that circle that I saw. I'm going to choose this surface again. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to new sketch and we're going to draw a circle using the same center point as this circle, which I believe is that point right there. And we're going to go out just about to the edge, right about there. And we're going to draw a second circle, just a little bit bigger than that circle, just like that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude those two circles a little bit less than the dragon. I'm going to extrude those up just one. And so now it looks like the dragon is sticking outside of the circle. I also want to add a hole for my keychain. And so I'm going to go to sketch. If I come right here to this point on the center of the circle and then come over a little, I can draw my circle, and a good size for this is 3 millimeters. I want the circle to be a little bit further away from the edge. So I'm going to click on the center and click on the outside edge, and I'm going to make this more like 4. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now we're ready to extrude that circle. We go to extrude, click on the circle, and I'm going to remove material. And this was a thickness of 3 millimeters, I believe. So I'm going to change this from 25 to 3 and hit check mark. And so what I should have now is a hole that goes right through it. I can see that that now goes right through. If I rotate this around, you can see through the keychain. So that looks good. Okay, so we're ready to write Derby out. I'm going to choose this work plane and I'm going to go to new sketch and I'm going to click on text. I'm going to draw my text right about there and I'm going to write Derby. Hit check mark. And we'll see how that turns out. Okay, so that's a little too big, but I like it otherwise. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the dimension of the height of this from 4.5 to, let's try 3.5. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. And what I want to do is I want to move that from there into a spot where there's a little more space. Right about there. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit the check mark, go to extrude, And I'm going to click inside of each letter. All right. Okay, so that looks good, except that I only want this to go up about a 0.5 millimeter. Text doesn't have to be brought up that much, and it's really thin, so the 3D printer has trouble printing really tall text. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, when I look at this, I think this looks a little bit simple. I want to add rounds and chamfers to this. So I'm going to click on chamfer, and on the edge of this, I'm going to add a chamfer, a very small chamfer, but maybe 0.5. Let's try it out. 0.5 millimeter chamfer. That's actually pretty nice. I'm going to do that to the back side as well. So I'm going to click on each of those. That looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark. Okay, so that makes that look nice. Now the circle that's going around the dragon, I want the top of that to be kind of rounded. So I'm going to click on the top edge on both sides, and this is going to have to be very small, maybe 0.35. So that almost looks like it's a rounded top. So I like that look. Now I would consider adding some shape to the outside edge of this dragon. If you want to add a fillet or a chamfer to this, it might not work. Okay, so there is my dragon keychain. It looks pretty good, and I'm ready to save this in a way that we can 3D print it. In the next video, we'll talk about how to save this in a way that we can 3D print it.